This is Thorn's YouTube channel. Make sure you're tuning in, hitting subscribe.
Now, I'm not talking about a goon session gotten out of control when I talk about a sheer awe that just left me mind blown in a way people probably would never expect. But by the way, if you want to support this channel, maybe get yourself some Gamersupps. You can get 10% off with the code Thorin, THORN, at Gamersupps.gg. I like the cherry limesicle, the lemonade, the guacamole Gamerfart 9000, which I'll always stress is just strawberry and lime. It just has a silly / irreverent name, doesn't it? Now, the player Shiro, who obviously came up in Gambit Esports, later to be Cloud9, now he's on Team Spirit, is a player where I actually think the framing around his career is until he joined Team Spirit, I actually think a lot of people saw him maybe as a choker or someone who was overrated in some way, or there was something fraudulent about him, and it was that sort of thing of like, oh, if he's that good, then where's all the trophies? Or where's his major? Ziwu has one. Or that angle of like, well, if Axile and Shiro are so good, then why is Cloud9 not doing that well? I will say I used to use that argument to explain why Nafani wasn't that good. By the way, is anyone calling for Nafani now to lead any of these teams? Does anyone ask for Nafani to join Team Spirit or VP? Does anyone? Of course, no one does, because he never was that good. So the interesting thing for me is this. When you consider Shiro's career, right, he's been a HLTV top 20 player every single year since we came from the online era, because he was nobody before that. He was obviously in Gambit Youngsters, wasn't he? So he was top 10 3 times. He was fourth in 2021. He was third in 2022. And 2022 was the one we had an entire year of LAN, no online events. And then he was eighth last year in 2023. And by the way, he almost certainly will be top 10, at a minimum top 20 this year. I'd actually say it'll probably be like, I'd guess like 6th or 5th or something this year. So he'll have a chance to go near his top peak again. And you look, he's won a few trophies on LAN, but I actually think people do look at this guy, specifically at majors, and they don't see him as the same kind of a threat as a Ziwu, a Donk, these mega players that are supposed to win the major and be the MVP. But I think if you look at his career, he actually should be, and he basically has been that player. This is a guy who was played at 4 different majors. Obviously, there's different stages in the majors. And he's had a surprisingly strong performance throughout majors, by the way, and throughout his whole career at majors. I think actually when I show you some of these stats, people will be shocked at how good this guy is. Like, he's actually just straight up hard carried most of the majors he's been at, even though there were some majors where maybe his team wasn't even actually supposed to be a team that went super deep. Now, admittedly, they were supposed to pretty much always be a playoff team, and there were even a bunch of majors I could argue they should have been the winner, if not a top 4 team there. But regardless, it's teammates that are letting him down, or the team as a whole, or opponents outplaying them. It's not Shiro playing badly. I suspect people think he's some kind of a choker because of specific matches that just stick in your mind. And this is worse than the case of Ziwu, because he was at a whole bunch of those matches just at the prestige events. At the majors, it's only been the odd match. It's basically the last match when they get eliminated, whether it's Cloud9 or Gambit, or if it's even Team Spirit now. I think that's part of the problem. I mean, by the way, the very last match he played at the most recent major, the first in CS2, PGL Copenhagen, when they were against FaZe, yeah, that was garbage, and especially because he did fuck all on Vertigo, which was the deciding map, because he seemed out of shape, quite frankly, on that map. Like, it didn't seem like something he expected to be playing in that moment. It didn't look comfortable. Yeah, it seemed like the pressure got to him, right? So I think that's sticking in people's minds, and people are thinking this guy just isn't that good. I'd actually say, by the way, in general, it's Axile that was the major choker. / didn't perform as well at the biggest events. I think he was the one that let the team down. I think Nafani let the team down massively. I think people like Hobbit were just good, but they were never actually as good as Axile and Shiro's. People tried to pretend because their numbers and rating looked comparable. So I think it's essentially just other aspects of the team dynamic. And if you think about it, Shiro's more of a defensive style of AWPer, so it's harder for that player to crack a game open and just hard 1v9 it. Part of what made Simple win wasn't just shooting people with the AWP. It's how aggressive his positioning was, how ballsy he was with the gambles he would take, how many times he would just even do low econ crazy pushes and just force the game. That isn't Shiro's style. Shiro is a traditional AWPer in absolutely the most traditional sense of how you snipe in Counter-Strike, and he is extremely good at that. Like, I can tell you the all-time great AWPers, if I showed this guy's POV with no nameplates on, people like Kogu, Delpan, Fraud, Margaret, they'd all all told me this guy's amazing. They'd actually maybe even assume he might be the best AWPer now in CS2. I mean, he'd certainly be in the debate for it. The problem is, because the best player is m0NESY, and m0NESY uses the AWP, and he certainly uses it a lot more aggressively, a la Simple, than the Shiro style of play. I think most people would obviously give that nod over to m0NESY, but I still think this guy's like a top 5 player in the world. So I think when we get into it, people are going to be actually shocked that he's actually a way better player than you realise in these massive pressure moments, even though he's never even been farther than the semi-final of a major. He's been in the semi-finals twice. Yeah, he had the odd letdown. I mean, let's be real, he's only been at 4 majors. He had one major that was a letdown, realistically. Beyond that, he had matches that were letdowns, and I think that's what we'll get into, because it's obviously the last match, a la ZywOo at Prestige, that tends to be what people remember and sticks in their mind when they think of the guy not being as good as you'd expect. I'll just throw in there, as I always point out with people like Simple, because how absurdly good he was at majors, and then when I'm trying to contrast the ZywOo to the all-time great players at NiKo, etc., most players play worse at the majors. If you don't know, ZywOo tends to play worse the deeper in the tournament he goes. Simple's insane because he's just insane. coldzera's extremely good. NiKo's a bit more hit and miss. It's more like flip a coin. Is he insane? Is he just good? It depends how you go across the board. People like Device are very good, but then they had the odd major or the odd match, obviously, early in their careers where they let themselves down. People like Get Right are amazing, but even then they've had the odd major that was just whatever because they just accumulated so many major appearances eventually. So I think when you get into it, actually, I do think this guy's now underrated. I think thanks to Cloud9 underperforming many times and only winning the smaller, almost like the studio / less important lands, or the ones that just weren't the big ones on the calendar, or even came when people have stand-ins or people weren't attending events. I think people just never viewed their whole team as that good and thought analysts were overhyping them, because obviously we were all in love with them from the Gambit esports era. Also, I just think if you think, obviously, the classic matchup where Cloud9 Gambit used to get their rocks off was obviously against FaZe Clan, wasn't it? And obviously everyone remembers Axa was kind of the pop-off player, and he's playing with a rifle, and he's playing that flashier, more explosive style with the crazy aim. And then that's adding, Spirit didn't win the major. They were mega hyped going into that. I think that also made people think, well, he must have not been that good, since actually Donk was fine. Donk in general has overshadowed him, a la Exile overshadowing him in Cloud9, but even worse now, because Donk puts up even crazier numbers, is the MVP if you win. If Donk doesn't play well, you probably can't win, by the way. And so as a result, yeah, you're actually in a pretty tough spot. I mean, by the way, as you just saw at that event, when Shiro and Donk play awesome, Spirit wins the event. When only Shiro plays awesome, they don't win the event, because Donk wasn't good enough. So I think you're actually in a tough spot if you're Shiro. But let's give him his flowers now, shall we? So as I say on the left there, check out my pinned tweet for exclusive content predictions. Obviously, I'll have a whole bunch that'll be about Blast right now, won't I? So first of all, if we just look at his career, as I said, he's been every single year HLTV top 20, and more than that, top 10. I mean, top 8 at this point. He was 4th in 2021, 3rd in 2022, and 8th in 2023. You go and look, right, it looks like he has a lot of trophies. Most of these are online. Like, this is online. Even worse, that's an online RMR trophy, by the way. Online, another RMR trophy online. These are all online. This was a LAN, but it was one where they played Entropic in the final. It still went 5 maps, and Entropic, by the way, that lineup didn't even last that much long beyond that, and obviously most of those players are gone. That wasn't particularly great. It was just all right. Then you had this. I think this was online as well, or even if it was, I think it was online, actually. It was just some BS online tournament the same year. Then you go, they had right after the major, you had the IEM Dallas, where they ended up beating Ents with standard snacks in the final, but obviously they did play FaZe at that event. So not a bad one, more of like a medium-sized event. This is a big event. It's a prestige event. It was from this year. Obviously, it was mega. Admittedly, you would say Donk was the best player there, but hey, pretty good 1B option for Shiro, right? Certainly no sidekick. And then most recently, they obviously won Blast Spring Finals, where just before we had the play break, right? So realistically, we're only talking about like 3 meaningful LAN trophies, maybe 4 at a push here. So not many trophies, but he's got amazing numbers. He's had amazing individual accomplishments. So understandably, people are going to hate on this guy and be like, he's overrated. If he's that good, where's the trophy? It's a 5-man game, by the way, guys. 5-man game. And he's doing an amazing job with one of the best guns in the game. So let's look at this guy's career. For his whole career, because he's still in his prime, you can do all time. If you do all time, either when people played way too much as an amateur or when they're at the end of their career, the stats are going to be shit because they're going to have normalized over their entire career. This just shows you, if you go that all time, you already see he's incredible. Like, what insane rating, great impact, very low deaths, pretty high kills, very good overall for your entire career. You go down here, fabulous, right? Look how amazing this is against top 5 opponents with 95 maps. This guy on LAN, this guy's just doing work. Numbers don't even go down that much. So, okay, then let's go and show just for big events. I'll show you again. He's just fucking phenomenal. The numbers don't even go down much, boys. Look, the numbers are almost the same. We've only shaved off like 10 maps off the top 5, by the way. His numbers are just bonkers over his career. This is big events. Admittedly, that might count some online events, unfortunately. No, this is all LAN. This is all LAN. Then let's go to majors. There's where we go. You have 4. So you have Stockholm, Antwerp, Rio, and Copenhagen. Because obviously this team famously failed to make it to Blast Paris, didn't they? Unfortunately, they were in that last chance qualifier thing that FaZe got out of, if you remember. So the first major comes with the context that Gambit were actually one of the favourites. Now, Na'Vi was the true favourite, especially because it was LAN, but Gambit right after them would have been top 2 or 3, and they did make it to top 4. They unfortunately had to play Na'Vi in the semi-finals, and that's who they lost to. So you look at this, these are still really good numbers. Yeah, not quite simple Zemu like peak numbers, but these are really good numbers. Great rating, great plus minus, excellent kills, low deaths. Then he had Antwerp. Now, the problem with Antwerp was, this is when the team's still pretty good. They're like right cooking. They're like still very good, but they haven't had the deep placings yet after this first major. People are wondering, yeah, you know what? That's not a very good major for this guy. Now, I don't want to hear excuses, blah, blah, blah. No, for Shiro, this is a massive performance. This is a very... To even say average would be unfair. It was well below average for him. For a normal player, it's average at the pro level, but he's not a normal player and he doesn't play a normal player's role. Then you had later the same year, so roughly a year from this major actually, you had IEM Rio that they got to. Right, look at this challenger stage Swiss system. These are some of the best numbers you'll ever see in a major. These are unbelievable. If you remember, they absolutely, I think they were 0-2 at one point, they absolutely would have been eliminated before this phase ended. If it wasn't for this guy going absolutely supernova. I mean, inhuman levels of stuff. If you remember, this was the one where they got eliminated by Imperial. He just smurfed on Imperial when he revenged them here. Don't worry, I'll go through some of the matches in a sec. So that was insane. Then you had the actual main event itself, because he managed from 5th to 8th overall there. So that's like the second Swiss plus the playoffs. These are fabulous. These are MVP numbers, by the way. But you'll see, he had a letdown in the last match, but it shows how good he was. The overall numbers are still this. And then most recently in CS2, because he didn't make Blast Paris, and we had the big drop before. It was almost a year later that we had the first major. These are very good numbers, more comparable to his first major. Not as high as this, but still very good. At least good, I'd say very good. Not quite his peak form. How about that? So good rating, good plus minus, low deaths, pretty good kills, decent sample size. But now you go look at the matches, you'll start to see why he's had these problems. So if you go back at his first major, look, he's smurfing. He's wrecking Ents. This was the one that had just started to go international. Had like the Dorto lineup with Snappy. He's playing Entropic. All right, results all so far. Virtus Pro. It's all looking excellent so far. Then you play an IP in the best of 3s. Because you lost this one to Entropic, so you were 2-1. You play an NIP in the best of 3s. You smurfed that series. By the way, they had Device at the time. Device was still a very good player. Then you play Furia. And this is the one where by winning this, this is the round of 8. This is one of the playoffs. You smurf. Remember, this is when like they had a pretty good team in Furia. Like they weren't elite, but they were like a solid dark horse. It was the next year, remember, when they went to the semi-final. Then you had the semi-final itself against Na'Vi, who was unbelievable and didn't lose the map here. You got absolutely smurfed on, and you didn't do very well. It's okay. Go on to the next major. Then we have the Antwerp major. So at the time, Cloud9 still one of the stronger teams. They play outsiders. Obviously, later in the year, would become Virtus Pro again. You barely beat them. It's not an insane performance. You play NIP and you lose to them. This is actually when you had no business in theory losing to NIP. But remember, even though NIP didn't have Device, they somehow made that rifle lineup work. And obviously they'd had the EPL top 4. And then at this major, by the way, they made it to the quarters. And they actually gave FaZe a fantastic game and could potentially have gone much deeper. So losing to them is not the end of the world. And actually you perform fine. Then you have a game against FaZe. This is a Swiss system. You get murked. It's back in MR15, remember. You don't perform particularly well. It's on Nuke. Can be a tricky map for AWPers. Then the key series that wrecks you is you play against Fallen's Imperial, The Last Dance, and overall you do well, but the last map's a nightmare and your team can't get over the line. If they'd have won this one, the opener in overtime, you'd probably win 2-0, it wouldn't even be a problem, but you don't and you let yourself down that one. Then you skip forward to IEM Rio, you lose the opener in overtime to Fnatic, who actually was decent. If you remember, they made top 8 at this major and lost the eventual champions in Virtus Pro / Outsiders. You played awesome in this game, by the way, even though you lost it. This is another one of those tournaments where he's hard carrying. You play against Greyhound and also lose that. So when you went 0-2, these were both OT games against lesser opponents, in theory, and it's your teammates who let you down. In this one, you're also amazing. It's another OT game. You're awesome. Great rating, great plus minus, great kills, great deaths. Then you get your revenge match against Imperial and Fallen. You're absolutely smurf. You go plus 28. Now, it's still really close. Double overtime. All first 4 maps were overtime, by the way. Double overtime, but this time you win and you go absolutely supernova on them. Then you get to these are all going to be best of 3s to get out of the Swiss system. You play Evil Geniuses, who does suck. And it's actually not even that crazy a second map you have, but the first map, you just smash them. Okay. Not quite as crazy as you think. You play Game Allegiant. This is in 2022, not the 2023 lineup. Game Allegiant's whatever at this point in time. You do pretty well against them. You have a carry series. Then you have this in the next Swiss system now. That gets you out. The next Swiss system, you barely beat FaZe. You're pretty good, but not amazing. You barely beat Na'Vi, similar story. You then play Heroic, who at this point in time, remember, Heroic actually makes it to the final of this major. They are one of the best teams in the world, and after this tournament, they win Blast Fall. You absolutely smurf on them. You go insane. You know, you're against Cadian, but at the time, people were bigging Cadian up. I think you smurf on this guy completely in a dominant series. Then in the quarterfinals, you play against Mouse Sports. So you're into your second major playoffs. You obviously did it with Gambit at PGL Stockholm. You play against Mouse, who is a good team, but themselves were thought to be chokers. If you remember how this one went, like, he was good on the first map. He was carrying on the second map. There was a turning point in it, though, where Mouse comes back, they win, and then they win the third map in convincing fashion. And actually, Shiro was fine. He just wasn't supernova. So this one actually is misunderstood and as maligned as him choking. He didn't choke at this one. He didn't. Like, you can see he did against Na'Vi back here. He definitely did against Imperial. But if you go to here, he didn't choke in this series. And actually, for the series overall, by the way, look at that. He's plus 24 for the 3-map series. Like, this is very good numbers all in all. It's not his fault. Now, Mouse himself didn't do much beyond that. They lost to Virtus Outsiders, and Outsiders won the major. Then you come to CS2. In the opener, they beat his old team Cloud9 quite easily. He does well. They beat Imperial, who at this point in time doesn't have Fallen. It's not even that relevant to a squad. They smashed them. Easy performance, nothing massive from him. Against Na'Vi in the rest of the Swiss, you can 3-0 and get out to the playoffs. He actually smurfs. Na'Vi, by the way, ends up winning this major. They win 2-1 in this match. Only map loss is an overtime loss in the opener, and he goes really well in all of them. Now, he doesn't have the craziest numbers, but look how few deaths, look at the overall stuff. This is all very good stuff. So then in the playoffs, here's the problem. Against FaZe, he lets the team down. Because on paper, you're supposed to beat FaZe. You beat them at Katowice. They actually haven't won any lands since, like, at this point in time, it would have been like the CAC thingamajig the previous year. They've had all these finals they've lost, and you smurfed on them in the final on key maps. So you come to that. The problem here is he goes -8 for the series and just isn't very, it's kind of underwhelming in general. And you can see this really could have been a win if he did turn up with any kind of performance. So you look overall, it's only individual games. Let's just look at the individual games. So you have the one against Na'Vi, as I said. The team gets smashed anyway, so let's just put that out there. You play an Overpass Mirage. Those are AWP maps, to be fair. Yeah, it's not very impressive, right? You expect more. Not that bad on the first one. Terrible on the second one. Absolutely smurfed on. Looks absolute shit. And obviously the problem is Simple looks fucking amazing, doesn't he? And everyone from Na'Vi goes crazy. By the way, as a team, Gambit played really poorly. I think Nafani did a terrible job, both individually and overall in this one. Then at the next major, the Antwerp one, like I say, you could have won 2-0, but you didn't. And when you go to the third, look, overall series, it's okay. But for someone as good as Shiro, this is like an underperformance. But you look, pretty good first map. Not very good, pretty good. All right, second map. Admittedly, if he'd have played better, they'd probably win 2-0. Then the third map is just shit. This is very underwhelming stuff, especially if at the same time all these players are going to smurf on you. I mean, look how old FNX, Fall, and Fur are at this point in time, mates. And Vinny never was anyone. So yeah, that's underwhelming. The Mouse one, like I say, I'll never hear anyone tell me that was shit. Like, look, he goes plus 24, guys. 3 of his teammates go minus, including Axile. He goes plus 24 with 66 kills. The best on the other team's Frozen with plus 10 and 57, for fuck's sake. And he massively out-orbs Torzi, too. He goes 14 kills more. And a fuck ton of, it's at like 16 plus 16 more. Way better. Everything better. So you look, first game, he gives them a real chance to win. This is the one where they lost, they won the opener. Second game, I mean, what more do you want him to do? They're supposed to win this one. They lose that one. Ancient, he's still doing well, and they lose. So I'll never hear that he lost that one. Now, admittedly, this last major, there's all sorts of ways that he potentially lost you this series. So you go and you look, you lose the opener in big fashion. So for the series overall, you're -8. and more deaths than kills because of that. Yeah, that's already not acceptable. On the opener, I mean, your team in general suffered. Zontic was shit. You were okay, but you could have done so much more on a Mirage as She-Ra the fucking Harper. On Nuke, it's actually kind of humdrum, even though your team wins in epic fashion in OT or whatever it was. It's kind of underwhelming stuff because Donk's really good. Zontic's having a good sit. The problem is, especially this third one. On Vertigo, you've seen him in the past be amazing on that map. He's done some really crazy stuff when he was in Cloud9. This is shit. Like, he gets out-fragged by everyone except Rops, who has the same number of kills and didn't perform well, and Rain, who's super fucking old. Like, Karrigan, at this point, bro, on the deciding map, has 6 kills more than you. You're a -3, 67 ADR, terrible rating, loads of deaths. Yeah, if you play even slightly better, you win this match, you're in the semi-finals, and who knows? Because, by the way, Ziwi was ill and then recovered, but then did he recover? And then he was only good for the other match. You had a real chance to win this major, by the way, or at least be in the finals. So I do think of this one, he did let you down. As I said before, it's actually Axile that's the major choker, by the way. If you go look here, Axile's just whatever at the first one. He's kind of whatever at the second one, but the numbers, at least fragging-wise, are good. In this one, he's like, all right, in the opening Swiss. Then he falls off a bit in the next. Then in CS2, he's whatever. Admittedly, actually, in the second Swiss in the playoffs, he was really good at the most recent one. But that CS2, it's very different. And obviously, She-Ra, at this point in time, he's long gone. He's in Team Spirit, isn't he? So, kind of a sad state of affairs. So for me, this guy's had very strong numbers over his whole career. Quite frankly, he's heading for a potential like Hall of Fame career. One of the best snipers ever in CSGO/CS2. I actually think he could have won the last major. He probably could win the next major. I think they'd probably be my pick to win the next major. If you look at the majors he's been to 4 in total. So let's go through them. PGL Stockholm, his team potentially could have won. They made the semis. He played well. He just had an underperformance in the semi-finals. By the way, against one of the hardest teams ever to beat in CS history, apparently. PGL Antwerp, he underperformed. The team underperformed. They didn't even make the playoffs. IM Rio, they made the quarters of, and I think they could have been in the semis. It wasn't his fault at all. And it didn't qualify to Blast Paris. You could put some of that on him potentially. And then in CS2, you have PGL Copenhagen. And I do think, yes, he underperformed in that quarterfinals. He's one of the reasons why they didn't go further. But realistically, that's what, like 1 overall major. Even then, it's mainly that match. You have a couple, like 2 out of 3, like elimination type matches here. I guess, yes, the Imperial one, you can add that in. So it's kind of a bit hit and miss, but I think actually there's an underrated element to how he's played in his career in general, but actually even at majors. I think people have gone too far pushing the idea that he's just a choker. Let's see for the upcoming ones though. Obviously 4 isn't a crazy sample size. Let's see when we get to 6 or 7, maybe I revisit this topic and either he emerges as a choker and that pattern becomes the dominant one, or maybe he has a couple of Smurf events and he's just remembered, as I think he's going to be, as one of the best players ever at the majors. Everyone needs a support network, and mine is, of course, my Patreon community, the Scrominati, who, in many ways, they're the Sonny to my Cher, saying, I got you, babe. So this video and all the others on my channel were kindly supported by the following names: Ahmed Hadju, Mac Pugnaccio Rakula, Adam Tomlin, Animosity, Jensen Go, Tosh, Toucan, and you know it. Jerky's Minion, my main man, always going to be referenced, one of the best patrons of all time. Would you like to ask a question in my AMA? Maybe you want to suggest a topic or a guest to say on my channel? Do you want teasers? Find out who the upcoming Reflections and Talk to Thor interviews are. Maybe you want to do one of those long discussions where you get to set the topics we talk about. Well, if any of these or others appeal to you, put your money where your mouth is. Join the Scluminati today via the Patreon link in the description box below.